Testing? Oh yeah, this thing works. Okay. My name is Smoke. I'm probably about to commit social suicide here as I earned the I Suck at PhreakNIC t-shirt that I got last year. My talk here for today is on a project that I'm advocating called Democracy 2.0. To begin the mission statement, it is my intent here today to announce the formation of a project to develop, implement, and maintain a secure and open source voting platform, open source election platform, whereas modern voting machines here and now today are simply inadequate to the task of being open and transparent in the various elections that are held in this country today. All you have to do is just Google up voting machine in Google, which I do on a daily basis, by the way, and the stories are literally dozens across the land that of a voter fraud, suspected voter fraud, California mostly, where a group of computer scientists recently audited the computer systems, the computerized voting systems in that state, and found that they were all greatly deficient in that process. Who did your voting machine vote for? That's a very good question. And the problem with that is you never know for sure. It's not only is it not auditable, but there's no paper trail whatsoever. Absolutely none to speak of. Now, another part of this presentation is going to deal with an idea that I've been thinking about as I've been sitting in traffic on the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway. And I've been doing that a lot. Direct democracy, which is the idea of the people themselves using such technology to vote on the issues as opposed to trusting a representative government to do that for you. Now, back in the day, say 1776, representative democracy was the best thing going around. Exactly. Not to mention the fact that communications problems really sucked back then. So much so that in the Battle of New Orleans during the War of 1812, it took 6 weeks for the truce between the United States and Britain to reach the people in New Orleans. Let's see. That would be what? Yeah, and we know how well that works. So direct democracy here would be classically termed pure democracy, comprises a form of democracy and a theory of civics where sovereignty is lodged in the assembly of all citizens who chose to participate. Simple enough. Depending on how it would be set up, and this is the important part, the assembly could make or pass executive motions, laws, rulings, edicts, and such, elect and dismiss officials, and conduct trials. A classic example of that on the bad side would be the witch burnings in Salem, which was conducted at that time by the religious majority there and held with the voting consent of the people. That's the bad part of democracy. But otherwise, when in reference to this, when people would be elected to office, they would be executive agents or direct representatives, as opposed to representative democracy where they get to vote their views. Not necessarily those of the people who voted them, but the people who pay them. Special interests, parties, that kind of thing. The entire process from start to finish must be entirely transparent. Open source software by its very nature is the only way to go. That means no good for Microsoft. Their old habits involved being closed source on everything right down to and including the kernel. So in order for that to work in an open source election system, that would all have to be open, and the entire process would have to be open. And I would have a better chance of seeing Elvis on a UFO than to see Bill Gates go open source entirely. Based on some of the preliminary experiments that I've done, I've downloaded, for example, just about every type of voting software available on SourceForge. based on my preliminary results, and they're very preliminary, the BSD-based systems, I think, may be the way to go in that, especially concerning BSD jails and how they function. My results on that are, to say the least, very incomplete, but if anybody out there are any BSD experts, I'd like to help. And that's why I said the last part of the statement here, where I say the exact nature is as yet undetermined and at this stage needs to be well planned. On the other hand, the system, once developed, needs to be simple enough for the average person to be able to set up and perform simple maintenance, like power supply, communications issues and such, because for the simple fact of most people who man voting stations, one in particular that I can think of is a little old, late 86-year-old woman who mans a voting station at a fire company outside of Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. She doesn't know much else. But people like that are probably going to be responsible for this. So the basic setup, so to speak, has to be dumbed down to the average person can reliably set it up. Tamper-proof, I'll be discussing, elements developed by the Trusted Computing Group could be implemented in the design of such a system. Example, a TPM chip that can verify the integrity of the system. This is something that I've been giving thoughts to recently, which is why I would like to somehow perform experiments with that. Microsoft is part of that group. So is Sun, so is Red Hat, as well as most of the major computer manufacturers out there, and more than likely the Chinese government. But it being the possibility of it being open source, here's where my homework part is incomplete. Whereas if the programming APIs, for example, could be released to the community, then trustworthy systems could be developed where the TPM chips can be used to verify the authenticity of the system. Just a thought. Minimal voter participation should be expected because people have lives to lead, jobs to work, family to see. Most people don't want to be troubled with it. They just want to be able to point and click. That's why you got popular sites like MySpace, Facebook. Most people don't want to know the guts of the computer system, but they will rely on experts to tell them that things are good. And if everything is open source to begin with, there's always going to be room for people to come up and call bullshit, pretty much. That's why I said that your process and code behind it should be entirely viewable, so that anybody who wants to, say, call bullshit, who has doubts about any aspect of it, can come up and say, hey, this is bullshit, and state the reason why. Paper verification must be required and accepted by the voter before the vote is registered in the system. No reason why that shouldn't be so, especially when something could break down. That is a scary thing, because that affects voter privacy in such a big way. Exactly. And that is something that is extremely undesirable in an open source voting environment of any way, shape, or form. Switzerland, for example, already uses direct democracy in a majority of their town, city, and state levels, and has been using this already since the 19th century. So actually there may be people there now that I could be unaware of who are also spearheading this movement. Even Theodore Roosevelt once had a thought on democracy, when he stated in the Charter of Democracy that, and I quote, "I believe in the initiative and the referendum, which should be used not to destroy representative government, but to correct it whenever it becomes misrepresentative." Yes, it does. And that is something that it could be, for example, a result of lack of careful planning. And yeah, I heard about that. Strange, isn't it? Exactly. What a wonderful world we live in. Sounds like a case of the particular statute not being well thought out and or bounced against the population, for example. Exactly. But the difference is, in an open society, there's people out there who will look for boundary conditions and who will say, hey, wait a minute, couldn't that be an issue there? Throughout New England as well, I come from a small town that actually does this. Nearly all towns practice a very limited form of home rule and decide local affairs through the direct democratic process of the town meeting. Simple show of hands, for example. I come from a town called Portland, Pennsylvania, where that was done at one time. Whether they do it now, I don't know. I haven't been there for a long time. Possible negative issues, of which there are plenty. The public may express a view that is incompatible to current law. For example, a majority of the group may deny voting rights to the minority. That is something that, for obvious reasons, would go against whatever current law would be in effect. I mean, you're telling a group of people they can't vote? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, it could, and that question in and of itself will only become worse in time as the baby boom population grows older. John Witherspoon, whom some people might not know, one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, said, "Pure democracy cannot subsist long or be carried far into the departments of state. It is very subject to caprice and the madness of the popular rage." I'll give you a good example of that, the situation in Jena, Louisiana, where people like the Reverend Al Sharpton really whipped up the local resentment against that. And I don't agree with everything that happened there, but the fact of the matter is they went out and they beat up somebody over this noose hanging incident. And I don't agree with the fact that it was done in the first place, but the violence itself was wrong. And Al Sharpton and so many other people are just missing that specific point. Exactly. Not to mention the fact that was also attributed to expert media manipulation. He was a very good student of Ronald Reagan. Ranging from the RIAA to multinational polluters to the major political parties themselves, these big brother or big business entities, both, would stop at nothing to preserve their bottom line and their grasp on power. Plain as day. I mean, would they want to give it up willingly? No, of course not. The opportunity to defeat the enemy is provided by the enemy itself, Sun Wu, to convince current political office holders at all levels that through this mechanism the people's voice should be heard and respected. Long story short, if you can verify a group of people who would vote a certain way, how can they refuse? The trick is in the verification. And with a verifiable and open source electronic voting mechanism in place, they want to challenge it, fine. Let them challenge it. Let them challenge it along all aspects of it. Every step of the process would be open source and available for inspection and review. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Mm-hmm. It's actually a very good idea. That is actually a very good idea. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. That's how it's done now. But imagine the possibilities of checking it verbatim while it happens. In doing that, however, something along the lines of voter privacy would have to be maintained, and that would have to be designed into the system to prevent or snapshots even. Mm-hmm. Here's an interesting thought along that subject I just had myself. I wonder if some of the Google APIs could be used for that purpose. An interesting thought. If the source is open, if the code is open source, as hardware as well, yes. That's why I was mentioning before about the TPM elements that even now they're developing. As long as everything there is open, why can't we use it for software verification? Not now, but I'm sure a substitute could be developed perhaps. That is open? Right, exactly. Proprietary is the one word we want to stay away from in this type of endeavor. That's what we've got all over the country. Not just Nashville, it's all over. And of course, the more people who would participate in this type of system, the stronger the voice. And have faith in that system. And that is at record levels right now because of the current political climate and the way votes are conducted now. I haven't been a political junkie myself until roughly around the time of 9/11. But before this, I never even gave this a thought. I'm sorry. You. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And the problem is, it's that having a situation like that is actually something you can't really measure. It's like having a hotel here, for example, that's doing bad business, and if the customer here feels, for example, that it's bad, they're not going to. They might not say anything. They'll just pack their bags and go, and that's that. End of story. They vote with their feet. Exactly. Good phrase for it. And of course, imagine for a moment if such a system were designed and implemented, then those elected officials who would not bend to the will of a verified majority could be held to shame and scorn by that very same media. But here's the trick now, verified. Meaning, if somebody would come up to me and say, well, hey, hundreds of people here, thousands of people, millions of people would think such and such a way. Prove it. Exactly. Hence, if it was verified, if they want to challenge the results, let them. Everything is open from step 1, 2, 3, 4, right up the line. Mm-hmm. Early voting? Mm-hmm. Interesting. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
day minus 14 to day minus 3. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
But I do typically go over the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but now correct me if I'm wrong, but the data that the voter uses is stored on those disks, right? Mm-hmm. Exactly. Well, let's just say I came across 5 or 6 of them very, how shall I say, surreptitiously at one time, which I'm not going to get into saying how, and they were not actually used in a live election, but hey, I'm no expert. If I could come up with that kind of material, so can anybody. And that is one of many different security issues that permeate. Mm-hmm. Hence why I was saying earlier where a paper record, it should be absolutely required and be okayed by the voter before that vote is accepted.
Another thing I'd like to let people know is if you have a Tuesday off, if you're work independently and you get a Tuesday off and you work 13, 14-hour days, 2 days a year,
Mm-hmm.
They are looking for people that are under 80 years old to man the polls.
Mm-hmm.
It's about super amount of pay, but you can get paid well.
Right.
And it does, you get to meet a lot of people in your neighborhood to do service.
Mm-hmm.
Plus you can get into the use of knowledge and acquaintance with these new electronic voting machines.
Mm-hmm.
Build up an experiential database on how they're working and look for discrepancies.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yes, and I'm familiar with that site as well. I've been reading that quite heavily over the past few years. Exactly. Oh, of course. They think something goes wrong with their system, and we'll just change the name, and the name will be nice and clean. Uh huh. Uh huh. Once a system has been developed, a key item will be to have the general public begin using it and providing feedback. This is after everything's been already set up. Feedback should go, of course, both to their governmental bodies as well as the developers of the system to make sure that nothing is overlooked for obvious reasons. Also publicize the process involved to keep it open to scrutiny. And that's another key as well as far as open source voting goes, where it has to be under scrutiny in order to ensure the validity of the vote. Voter verification, being able to verify the person casting the vote, is necessary to eliminate fraud. Privacy concerns for this are immense and should be well thought out to ensure the continued security of the voting population. Verification of both the vote and the voter can eliminate the practices of buying votes and phantom voting, which even nowadays is concerned. People have fake IDs and I'm sorry? Exactly. And the end as a result of this would be a faith in a corruption-free political process could be restored, as well as voter interest can be greatly increased. Mm-hmm. 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 That is an interesting thought. Right. That's right. I didn't note that, but you're right. I did hear about that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And last, if anybody wants to help, email me at drlou@nerdshack.com, and I can respond with updates to this project as it happens. What I'd like to do myself sometime in the near future is to come across some systems with TPM chips, for example, and start experimenting with those. And of course, new ideas, always open to this. And that's pretty much it. End of talk. Sorry, I'm probably not here for the hour. Thanks. We still got time yet. They're not going to have the jet engine for another 25 minutes, so. Sure. Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you this. Is the source code that's used with gambling machines open? Is the electronic schematics open? I know in some cases, for example, they do print schematics for slot machines, for example, but they're not very common. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And incorporate that as we build the process at work. Lately around here, that idea is going to be a little tricky because the lottery had a problem in the past month that it was identified that the lottery number, the lucky number generating machine that went from balls to computer.
Mm-hmm.
And that the program was accidentally written to where certain combinations of numbers would never appear.
Mm-hmm. And if the source code wasn't open.
I'm not sure. That's what I don't know whether our source code is open.
No, I can tell you it wasn't. The guy, and I hate to say this without being recording, but I'll say it anyway. I met one of the people who was implementing this thing, and the guy was kind of arrogant. I mean, he just was. He was a nice guy, but he was kind of arrogant.
So it's not open source, so anything could happen.
Exactly. Interesting. And I would have never heard about that up there in Pennsylvania.
So you can probably make a good soundbite that a slot machine is more trustworthy than a voting machine.
Ain't that something?
Hopefully our voting machines are more trustworthy than our lottery machines were.
Mm-hmm. Not only state back, but it's the basis of all of democracy. And it's the thing that needs to be critically trusted the most. Now, with TPM chips, when they first came out, there were so many fears about privacy laws, for example, and how computer manufacturers and Microsoft can only run certain code on the laptop. And that is a valid concern with laptops. But the TPM chip is perfect for an application where it involves election machines. Because the TPM chip can be used to verify the code that's already there, and to verify the equipment that's already there, and to verify that it hasn't been tampered with. And depending upon the design of those chips, would be the code could be written to accommodate that and to use those features. I missed that one, sorry. Mm-hmm.
Probably using an off-shelf component is how do we really know what's all, even if it is still all documented, how do we even know what's really in these processes? What about all these opcodes? What if there's combinations of opcodes that this causes actually this to occur?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And this is an application where the hackers of the world can basically keep the chip makers honest. Exactly. Just like people right now are trying to hack 2048-bit RSA keys that the government uses, that PGP uses. Exactly. But there's hackers out there actually actively trying to work that out and trying to crack that. Yeah. Exactly. And now they're talking about RSA keys. Exactly. Pretty much.
The storm botnet bigger than the largest supercomputer on the planet.
Yeah.
You want to rent some time on it?
I'm sure that's available from somebody somewhere.
Don't forget Moore's Law.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And of course, if something like this were developed and implemented, of course somebody can crack it. But considering the consequences of that, then something better would have to be designed at that point. It would be a cat and mouse game, but consider the goal. Trustworthy computing, being able to trust in your government to do the right thing.
Well, even if we do have a completely solid elections process, you still have the electoral college that could say, well, I don't trust this newfangled thing. Their votes probably weren't. They have the right to say no confidence in the public and vote however they want.
In the application of voting for the president, yes. Keep in mind, though, that the president is an executive. And if, say, everybody in Congress were to overrule him, what's he going to do? Mm-hmm. Exactly. That's already written in the Constitution. And the beautiful thing about this is, or at least as far as my idea goes, once a system would be developed and implemented, there's nothing that I can see right now with current law that would stop it. I mean, think about it. That would be totally wrong and against any type of open democratic process. Calling the media would and should, by right, get up in arms over that. Exactly. Exactly, because the process would then be considered a state secret, and the results would be considered a state secret. I mean, it's just as bad as these so-called national security letters that are being served on ISPs right now, and where the entire process is kept secret. Or the same thing if they serve those letters on a public library to see what a person reads. It's just as wrong as that, if not worse. I know. Scary, isn't it?
That's why this is a valuable discussion. I'm saddened by the fact that we don't have a bigger crowd. When it came to network security earlier today, there was a huge crowd.
Oh, of course.
But this is dollar for dollar. This is where your money is, your freedom.
This is the root. This is the root of it all right here. But this is the root of it all right here. I mean, to do anything to solve all the problems here with Bush and with the Republican Party and everything else that's been going on since 9/11, this is the best place to start, I think. And this whole process is the best place to begin. Now, do I really suck at PhreakNIC? No? Damn, then I have to give the shirt back I got last year, huh? Okay. No, nothing like that at all. It's strictly held one day, from roughly 8 to 8, roughly.
This is a modern miracle to happen nationally.
Mm-hmm.
Used to, the residency requirements were onerous, change their and you had to do like 6 months or a year and have the rest of the vote. And only vote on election day. Absentee ballots was almost impossible. So it's really, the pendulum has swung rapidly to the other extreme of voting just by passing the early voting law.
Mm-hmm.
As bad as elections are out in the country and still are here, what you're saying, the pendulum, if you get enough momentum behind it, the pendulum can swing.
Well, not only would I like to get some momentum behind it, but exploring further along the TPM chipsets and the type of hardware verification, that is something I would like to explore a lot more in the coming weeks and months.
Who would we trust to build such a system? Obviously it would be us, but at the same time, it almost comes down to who do you...
The community itself. These would be the people that...
Would it be a public domain system? Well, how would the legal structure behind what the system writing on be? Would it be property of the government? Would it be public domain? Would it be somebody's copyright? I mean, how would that work?
That is an interesting question. I don't... To that end, I think it might, and this is just a thought, model along the system of OpenBSD and how that's governed by the core group of developers. Mm-hmm. Federal Election Commission. It's a tempting thought, but there again we're dealing with an official government agency subject to official government money and official government decisions. And I would feel that something like this should remain independent of any form of government whatsoever.
Bottom-up implementation, if you build it, start at the local level, show that it works,
Mm-hmm.
spread it,
And work your way up.
move up.
Right. And the local is where to start.
Laboratory of democracy.
Interesting phrase. Right now I live outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I'm actually kind of new to that area there. I've only been there a few months. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, actually, as nice a place as Tennessee is, I'll probably be staying up there. Yes. The possibilities are open. As far as hardware? At the moment, no, but it could evolve from one system into another and into another still. Say, for example, if the technology could be developed and implemented, say, even 20 years down the road, where people could actually do this at home. That would increase it dramatically because people wouldn't have to go to a central place to cast their vote. Mm-hmm.
Yes on this one, no on that one. I don't know, so I'll come back to this when we see.
A lot further development would be needed along those lines right now. I mean, TCP/IP does not lend itself to such a secure process. Exactly. No, I haven't. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm.
Well, you can have a semi-secure, if you can't have an end user at home, you can still have the voting facilities at the libraries, the fire halls.
Oh, of course. Of course. I mean, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and that's where that process would start. Verification like that would be one of many issues that would have to be settled before voting at home could be implemented. Like I said, that's just one of many things. Yeah. And they're trying to come out with a national ID and all that. I know.
We've already got a national ID.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And a lot further than that. Trust me, I've seen this. That's why you won't see it anytime soon, because of situations like that and the mountain of security concerns that would have to be factored into that consideration. So you won't be seeing voting at home anytime soon. But like I said, let's learn to walk before we learn to run, and start with the actual voting stations itself, and then move on from there. But voting at home, say in 20, 30 years' time, could entirely be possible if the system is developed with these stated objectives in mind. If people's privacy can be assured, and if the entire process is open source and open for verification from beginning to end. Mm-hmm.
That way you don't close
Right.
And the other thing I would point out is if you try to get to open source, it's got to be open and well documented. Because if you just have a bunch of mess of, God forbid they end up implementing into something crazy that nobody understands the code is,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no documentation, well, that's not good.
Open and complete documentation. You're right. That would go along with the open source, because what's the sense of having open source software if nobody can read it, if nobody can understand it? And it takes a computer doctorate to read it. That's...
You get the line the whole world is open source with the right reverse compiler, but that's classified.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Thank you much. Now I guess there's going to be a jet engine. Even I want to take a look.